What's up, everyone? Happy Tuesday night. I'm Rob Whiteside, and this is Deep in the Plus, where we go deep into the Disney Plus vault and find those little hidden gems that either you've overlooked or you haven't looked into for a while. We've got a good one for you tonight, the Three Caballeros, and to talk with me, Miss Jill Diffendahl. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm awesome. I'm excited to talk about this movie.
Yeah, so this is one that you were like, hey, hold on to this one because we need to talk about this one, and you said you needed to talk about this one. You know what? I like this movie. We've got a lot to talk about with this one, but honestly, this is one with a lot of history to it. I think the first thing we all think about when we think, at least in the Disney community, when we think about Three Caballeros, is the Grand Fiesta Tour in Mexico, and we will get to that. I'm sure by the end of this, but what is it that stands out to you specifically about this movie?
So this movie, I just remember so many aspects of it from my childhood. And the weird thing is, I don't think I remember this movie specifically in its entirety. What I remember is when I was a kid, I had the Disney Channel, and which was a paid thing, you like HBO or whatever, like as a subscription channel back then. And they would run cartoons and things, but the cartoons would not be a full 30 minutes. And so because it was a paid subscription channel back then, they didn't put commercials on it. They would just take little cuts and clips and things from films and Mickey shorts and things like that to fill out the rest of that half an hour time slot before they'd start the next show. And so many pieces of Three Caballeros were used to fill those little time slots in between shows on the Disney Channel, or they would even just sort of be little like buffers, like maybe they were only 30 seconds or a minute. And I would just see them constantly. So I have so many memories, and watching this film again now, like it's weird how many little pieces of the movie I remember, but not necessarily putting it all together as one full storyline.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And you know what? This is a movie that has a lot of like backstory to it. If anybody's ever watched Walt and El Grupo, that movie kind of explains the goodwill tour that Walt and a group of his animators went. So to me, it is more of an anthology-ish type of a movie, like a bunch of things pieced together, than it is an actual story like Bambi, like Dumbo, like Pinocchio, like a lot of the classics. So I think for me, as a little kid, and I was a little bored by this, honestly. I think that it was not enough of Donald for me, and it was a little bit more tourist video. And then understanding now why it was more a little bit tourist video makes a lot of sense.
I mean, the craziest part is the fact that this movie was released in Mexico before it was released in the United States. I mean, the point of this movie wasn't for Disney to put out a movie for America. The point of this movie was, it was the U.S. government basically tasking Disney to to help spur better relations with Mexico and South America, because we were in the middle of World War II, and the panic was, if like every country that's not currently involved in the war needs to pick a side. And so America didn't want, heaven forbid, Mexico, our neighbor to the south, like land border, going over to the Axis power. So it was, what can we do to go and absorb their culture and be friendly and make this sort of overture to say, we're all on the same team here. You want to be on our side.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And it's really funny to talk about Donald Duck and Axis powers in the same breath, but
this is nothing compared to the Donald Duck Nazi propaganda films that Disney
Victory Through Air Power.
Yes, I mean, yes. This is nothing compared to that. Jeez, those movies are insane.
I would say let's look at it, just as the nice, clean, calm piece that it is. But as you start to get into it now on Disneyplus, there's a disclaimer. It's a lot of little text, like you saw it too, right? So when you go in there and it says, like, this is basically, it's saying, hey, this is culturally insensitive, and we know it. So hang on, I guess. I do appreciate that Disney still holds these things in its original form and acknowledges the errors in them. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. And it's interesting because I feel like this movie is probably, even though it contains such so many different depictions of Brazilian and Mexican culture and people, some of it is very traditional, but I don't know how much of it is really stereotypical. I mean, I think the point of this movie was to show all these different aspects of Brazilian and Mexican culture. And yes, they absolutely didn't do it perfectly. But in the grand scheme of things, like there are no, stereotypical characters. I feel like, well, okay, maybe Panchito is a little stereotypical. But I think overall, the idea was to try to introduce the Mexican culture to America and vice versa, not as any kind of, canned character that could just be there for a joke or whatever. And the other thing, and this is something most film houses up until recently never did, is the guy who voiced Jose was from Brazil and the guy who voiced Panchito was from Mexico. Like they at least used voice actors from the countries that the characters were supposed to be from, which you rarely saw after this. And it was always Americans putting on accents, not people from those countries.
Oh, that's a good point. So when, once we're into this movie here, there's the Three Caballeros song. We hear it as like kind of the overture to this, which, is pretty exciting. You feeling that? You feeling that vibe right now? You getting into it? And then it did something that I noticed like that we've seen in like Muppet movies where it lists Donald, Jose, and Panchito as like the stars. It doesn't say voiced by. It just says, oh, starring these dudes. Which I thought was kind of cool that they like introduced them as, as their characters in the titles. And then we get into this. This is a very short movie. It's an hour and 11 minutes, and yet there's a lot that happens in it. And when we first open up into it, Donald is getting this gift because it's his birthday because it's Friday the 13th. Here's what I find weird about that. Disney lists his birth date as June 9th, which I don't even think it was a Friday, but it says Friday the 13th, and not only that, and we'll talk about the Legend of the Three Caballeros, the TV show that came way after. That episode, the first episode, also starts acknowledging Friday the 13th as Donald's birthday. So I don't know when all that happened, but anyway, so it's his birthday. He opens up this gift, and it's home movies, and he's like, "Oh boy, just what I wanted."
It's like said no one ever.
Right. Here's somebody else's home movies.
You and
I think I'm losing Jill. So, but I will say that, I've never hoped for home movies. And then the next thing that would happen is we go into that they're talking about books after that. And so we've got books. How exciting is that? Not really. A lot of the stuff that's happening happens within a book. So they go from home movies to books. A lot of the action happens within books. And I'm just like, when does the madness stop? When does he get something that's actually good? And eventually he gets a piñata, but we'll get to that later. So it opens up with the home movies. He goes into it. And then it was... I used to think that this thing was very disjointed when I would watch it, and I think that the present is supposed to tie it all together, right?
Yes, this is all a series of presents that that Donald gets for his birthday. So he gets the movies, and then he gets the book from Jose, and then he gets a third gift, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, so like you said, it's an anthology movie that the premise of the gifts is what ties it together. But honestly, they're so like the home movies are all of these rare and strange birds. And so you've got my favorite part is the Araquan bird who just runs around like a maniac. And honestly, in my opinion, is probably a very strong ripoff of Woody Woodpecker, who came out just a few years. I think Woody Woodpecker came out in 1940, and this movie was 44. So I kind of feel like there's some pretty strong IP borrowing happening there. But you mentioned the Legend of the Three Caballeros, the TV series, and in that show, the Araquan bird shows up again. Only his name is Airy, and he's kind of like their, I don't know, house keeper, but not, I don't know. He's just like this sort of little companion that hangs out in the house all the time. But it's interesting that like it's clear that he is the most memorable character from this film, other than the three stars themselves, the Three Caballeros, that has any real kind of legs after this, beyond this movie.
Right. Well, and I mean, and he has that catchy little tune. Can you hum a little bit of that for me? Yep.
Like that.
Quality. Quality.
Yep.
So, so this little bird is floating around, and that's something that happens later. But so let me back up a little bit to when this starts out. They go into the South Pole, and it's like little sight gags, like the fact the South Pole is on the bottom of the Earth, and so they're going to turn the theater back right side up so that you don't have to stand on your head. That's kind of funny. But when they go into it, they talk to Professor Holloway, which I love the fact this is Sterling Holloway, and they call him Professor Holloway. And of course, for those of you who don't know, Sterling Holloway, the voice of Winnie the Pooh, Kaa, great, amazing
Cheshire
voice actor.
Cat.
Is that one? I hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. It was a joke because I know you freaking love you some Alice in Wonderland.
I freaking do.
There you go. So they go
On a
into
future episode
penguins.
of Deep in the Plus.
Yes, exactly. They go into penguins and they start talking about penguins, and I love this scene. And we were talking about being able to break out a piece of this and put it on a video here and there. This little scene with Pablo, the penguin who is too cold, is a cartoon unto itself. Where he's trying to escape the island, or like the South Pole. And so he takes his like all of these attempts to try to get out, and he finally gets to like a desert island, where he ends up like, just kind of chilling, pun intended. So along the way, he sees like the island of Robinson Crusoe, the Amazon jungle, that kind of thing. So it was really kind of a neat little like story unto itself, and that's like the first story they tell us. Do you have a favorite story in this episode or in this movie?
I don't know. I do love Pablo a lot. And again, it's because that segment by itself was kind of cut out and replayed as a short on the Disney Channel when I was a kid. So I've seen Pablo probably like 100 times, even though I haven't seen Three Caballeros all the way through, anywhere close to that. That's definitely a big part of kind of my favorite thing about this movie is, and it's probably one of the longer sort of like freestanding stories that gets told, other than Burrito, Gauchito and Burrito. And I prefer this one. I think it's adorable. I think it has better, like, I think it's a good sort of fable for kids because it's, kind of, don't worry that you don't fit in with everybody else. If you want something different than what everybody else wants, like, you should go after it and not care. If it's hard to get, you should just keep persisting and trying until you find your happiness. It also makes me laugh because, I think a lot of our WIGS and some of our regular viewers for WDWNT shows know I recently spent 6 weeks in Florida. And so I, like Pablo, am now itching again to get somewhere where it's warm. So maybe that resonates with me a lot right now. It just kind of, but it's also funny, and like it has this, what I feel like is a kind of very adult twist at the end of like, once he gets to the desert island, he dreams about going back to the cold and to Antarctica again. And I think it's kind of funny that like, the grass is always greener, and also like sometimes it's more about getting what you want and, the not having than it is the actual having. And then you're kind of like, oh, well, maybe what I had before was actually better. But I think that's, to me, I appreciate that more as an adult now, because that kind of is what life is.
That's fair. So then they go into the birds, and that's when you see the bird. And again, the bird's name is the crazy one, the Woody Woodpecker.
The Araquan bird.
Yeah. So I have this problem, and I'll talk about it later, that I don't know the names in this, and a lot of it's because of the accents, and so I'm not really sure I'm strong on a lot of the names and how they're used. So that's just on me, though. That's a me problem. But one of the things that they get into with the birds is they talk about like there's a joke about the toucan. Like the toucan can. I mean, I don't know. It's just
What
but
a
it's all about
time to toucans have making love. That is the verbatim line from the movie. And I'm just like, really? This is an animated movie. That's kind of like Disney is for kids. Why are you talking about two birds making love? That just it's like one of the first hints at how kind of suggestive and like uncomfortably weird this movie is as
I
it
don't like
progresses.
this.
Yes, yes. That was like, I mean, that was your hint. That was foreshadowing of all the inappropriate stuff that's gonna come later in the
Yeah, I
movie.
know. I agree. And so these are movies that back. This was back before they decided they wanted to do adult cartoons like South Park and Simpsons and Family Guy and
Way before.
whatever. Yeah. So I mean, at this time, cartoons were for kids, and so stuff like this, when they have questionable content, I think we call them on it a lot more because they were G-rated. These were family movies. This was not the place for that. So they have this whole thing with the birds. And then when they're ramping us up to birds because the whole thing seems to be about birds. It stars three birds. And then they get into this thing where I feel like they had this piece of content, the little gauchito and burrito, where they were like, hey, it doesn't really fit, but this donkey has wings, so
He has
maybe?
the wings of a condor.
It's a reach. It's a reach. I feel like this one doesn't fit in this movie a
You're not
lot
a fan of
because
Little Burrito and Me?
I I am a fan of it. Like actually, we were talking about like Pablo is a good section of it, and this one, and I think this is a neat story, but it feels like it was sort of like a cop out to be in this movie. But again, it was the war. They were putting together these anthology movies. This one seemed to fit because he had wings. I do
All
think
of
this
this
one.
movie was a cop out for being in this movie. All like none of it is super consistent or like highly linked together. It's all like
Yeah, but if they're to me they're putting together the birds as this is the common thread for all of it as the birds. So
well, yeah, but that falls
having the
apart like 20 minutes into the movie.
because of Gauchito is what I'm saying. But you know what? I
Poor
mean, it's a
Gauchito.
cute little thing. He's one of the things I don't recognize in this, and as again when I watched this as a kid versus watching it now, is that the narrator for the little Gauchito is speaking in rhyme, which every
Oh,
now
it's
and then,
verse.
yeah, it's verse, but every now and then I lose the fact that he is because of the pauses, because of some of the things like the reactions that he'll do. It breaks me from that, so it is kind of cool that it's in verse.
To me, that's like the coolest part of this. Like, I don't, there's, it feels very Alice in Wonderlandy that they're talking. I mean, other parts of this movie feel very Alice in Wonderlandy as well. But that they're talking in sort of this sing-song verse, and it's, I don't know, is it iambic pentameter? I'm too far out of my English major to recall, but it feels that
Yes,
way. It
let's just
feels
say
like,
yes.
I mean, it's lyrical. It lulls you in. I think it makes the story more engaging. It's charming. It's so very charming, and it's kind of this weird little, in like a Ferdinand the Bull kind of way, that it's kind of
Yeah,
this weird little thing by itself that's just it's adorable, but it's so different from other things, and yet it's still so Disney.
right. No, I agree. So here we are, 22. I clocked it, 22 minutes and 30 seconds in, and here comes Jose. So we've had Donald up until now. He's opening his present. He's just basically been like in between these bits, and now here comes Jose to save the day. Like I love this part. I love when he shows up. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Donald calls him Joe.
Oh, Donald absolutely calls him Joe. And if you turn on the subtitles, sometimes they say Joe instead of Jose. Um, my favorite part of Jose showing up is the fact that the gift that is in the box for Donald from Jose is smoking. And it like the book, it's a book, and it like sort of like leaps out of the box and is bouncing around and it's smoking the entire time. I just think that's hilarious. Like, I know in terms, like you were talking about the warning ahead of time and how like one of the things that Disneyplus warns about is and a lot of cartoons, I guess today warn about is tobacco use. But it's just so funny that like this whole package is just like bouncing around and like billowing out clouds of cigar smoke.
Well, and let's talk about like the smoking. Like, yes, everything Disney seems to have a disclaimer, whether there's somebody smoking for a second or whether they're smoking longer. But Jose, that's part of his character, is the cigar hanging out of his mouth. And so there is a lot of smoking when it comes to Jose. I don't know.
That guy sure can smoke.
Sure, exactly. That's what everybody always says about him. Good old Joe. But one of the things that when Joe comes in, good old Joe, that I quote all the time is, Bahia? Have you ever been to Bahia? Ah, Bahia. Like, I mean, it's just like, you just can't find a person I haven't annoyed with that before, because it's just like, anytime somebody says Brazil, I just go off on that.
So I find it funny because like my favorite and you talked a little bit earlier about some of the gags and stuff that they do, and like Jose goes on this whole thing, have you been to Bahia, Donald? And it's just this sort of like, and he's like zoned out in his own sort of like reverie and barely even like remembering the fact that Donald is there. And then all of a sudden Donald is like, well, have you been to Bahia? And Jose is like, no. And it's just sort of like, why did you just go off about this for the past 5 minutes? You've never been there either. Yeah. And you're from Brazil. Like, I don't understand.
That's the joke, obviously, though.
Right.
Yeah, and I...
There's a French Imagineer, Eric says in the chat. He smokes.
It's funny. I mean, the long payoff, but it is a funny joke. And then they go into a book to learn about it. But there's a section, like when I'm watching this and I'm seeing like the sections of what they're talking about with Brazil. First thing I was looking at thinking, why aren't these sections in the Mexico boat ride, the Grand Fiesta Tour? They should totally. And then I'm like, because it's Brazil. Like, I don't know why in my head, I guess was like, oh, they're all in that pavilion. This stuff should be in that pavilion. But so once I start thinking about that, I'm thinking about why hasn't there been a Brazil pavilion well before now? And that's, again, something when we get to the end, we could talk about a lot of the park tie-ins and things like that. But so then we're 30 minutes in, and here comes live action. So this is one of Disney's full-length animated features. This movie is in that group. This is a full-length animated feature, but there's a lot of live action in this.
Mm-hmm. It's the first full-length live action animation film.
So to me, I feel like it shouldn't count any more than Mary Poppins or So Dear to My Heart or
Do you think Mary Poppins doesn't count
as one of their full-length animated features? It doesn't. It's not listed as one. But
so it's not listed, but this is interesting.
Yes,
I didn't realize that they were not put in the same category.
No, they're not. So there's those movies like Pete's Dragon, like So Dear to My Heart, like Song of the South, like those movies that have live action with animation in it that do not count as full-length animated features. They are not. And even though these anthology movies are anthology, they're not one long story. They do count. Again, Fun and Fancy Free, Make My Music, those count. This one has so much live action in it, I feel like it shouldn't count as one of their full-length animated features. That's just my take on that. But so
I think that's fair. I would need to look like a timing. I would want to see like a timing breakdown and like see if that's what it's related to. Because I mean, like the first, like you said, 20-some minute, like Jose doesn't even show up until 20-some minutes into the movie. And all of that is animated. I don't know.
So it's 30 minutes in when we start seeing this, but the interesting part is that it's the book is the animation, and they're inside the book, and they're live action. So then there's a time later when they go outside, and they're very much like the Grand Fiesta Tour. They're animated in a live action world, like when they're at the beach, which, good Lord, we'll talk about that in a minute. But this scene,
I don't like it.
exactly, the scene with them dancing, you know, I mean, so first we had, again, the home movies. Now we've got like people dancing inside books. It just doesn't feel like, you know, a family movie. It just feels more like a you know, a propaganda movie, which I guess it was. But it's just this is where it breaks down for me, and where it always used to break down for me is this live action scene. Then 41 minutes in. One thing I wanted to mention is when they do go into the book, they shrink down. Then when they're going to get back bigger, Jose pulls out his thumb, blows into it, gets bigger, and then he has Donald
and says it's black magic. He says it's black magic.
Yes.
Like,
so then Donald
where'd that
does
come
it,
from?
and Donald is just hurting. He's just doing it wrong, and he's getting twisted, and he's in pain, and Jose's just laughing at him. And I'm thinking, happy freaking birthday, Donald. He shrunk you down, and then he's trying to like screw with you, and this is just, it's when you step away and look at the premise of it, it's like he's just torturing poor Donald at this point. And he's like, oh, no, you're using the wrong finger. Oh, you got to blow into
When
this
you
one.
look at the premise of all of this, though, like, how nice are any of them to each other? You know, like,
Yeah.
Donald kind of like cast his friends aside to like lecherously go after women
Oh, no, you
repeatedly.
got to hold off on that part. You got to hold off on that part.
It starts with this, though. It starts with the live action dance scene with the cookie seller, who is Carmen Miranda's sister. But she, like, it starts there where Donald's basically like kicking Jose out of the way to try to get at her. Like, I mean, they're not very nice to each other. Jose calls him a wolf like 3 times in the movie. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so we get through this. 41 minutes in, we hear the instrumental version of Three Caballeros, and 42 minutes in, Panchito. The gang's together. 42 minutes in to an hour and 11-minute movie, we finally see Panchito, who is like, you know, it's almost like trying to find Luke at the end of a Star Wars movie. It's really crazy. So you got them all together. The gang's all here. The Three Caballeros are together. And so then they talk about the piñata, because that's his gift to Donald, is the piñata, and Donald doesn't know what a piñata is. So they're explaining a piñata, and they tell the story of the little kids and going through the village to find shelter for Mary and Joseph. And I don't know this story. Like you and I have talked about the fact that I am a huge, like, I lecture people about the 12 days of Christmas, because they're not the 12 days before Christmas, they're the 12 days after Christmas. And in a lot of the Hispanic cultures, they do celebrate the fact, you know, they celebrate Christmas on Three Kings Day, or on the Epiphany, at the end of the 12 days, because the idea is that, you know, the birth was on December 25th. It took the wise men that long to get there to give the presents, and that's the 12 days of Christmas. So this 9-day story, I'm not sure I understood this or knew this. Is this something you were familiar with? I can't hear you now.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Take 2.
I think this is more a story of Mary and Joseph seeking shelter before Mary gave birth to Jesus, and so they're going around seeking shelter, posadas, and it's always no shelter, no posadas. I thought this is a very sweet moment in the movie to me, and it reminds me a lot of Disney World at the holidays, and sort of the whole they do the Festival of the Holidays in all the different countries. I would love to see them do something with this in the Mexico Pavilion. I think this would be fantastic. It would be IP based, I think because they're already using Caballeros in the Mexico Pavilion. I think this would be really cool. But I loved this story. I thought it was very captivating, and I thought the way Panchito told it was very engaging.
Yeah, no, I think Jessica is in chat, and I'm like, I didn't.
Jessica will probably correct us.
Yes, absolutely, because I'm just like, again, I felt like I was sort of the expert on this whole thing from the fact that my birthday is on the 12th day of Christmas, so I feel like I knew these traditions. I did not know this one, and you're right, it is a very sweet moment, and it's very different animation style too. This is something that, there are a lot of different animation styles in this, but this is really more of a still painting that they've done here, and it's leading up to.
They do a lot of that.
Good.
Sorry, I was going to say I think they do a lot of that in the Bahia segment. Bahia, that there's sort of these still images, and they're layered, so it's not one flat image. It's multiple. In Disney's multi-screen animation style, that there's some sort of like perspective shifting, but it's all sort of the same frame, the same images for a long period of time. There's a lot of that to me feels like Fantasia in this.
I was going to say the same.
There are
I made a note about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the Bahia segment, some of the La Posada segments, and some of the stuff after they get to Mexico, and where Donald is like freaking out about another girl. It has very Fantasia type vibes to it for sure.
Yep, I definitely made a note about that one. And so, again, as they're telling the story of the No Shelter, I believe Panchito may be telling the story. I'm not hearing the story as well because of the accent, and I think about a child trying to understand what's going on. So I think it's a great story. And I love the fact that it's authentic. But I think I just didn't know this story before. So they go from that into the piñata, and the fact that that's the story of the piñata, that's awesome. Like, again, didn't know that. All I know is they always had them at Party City. That's what I know about piñatas. So then they go to a story of of Mexico City and the flag, and I think that's, again, we get into a very educational moment here, and it's very reminiscent of Epcot. And so the fact that they didn't start the Mexico Pavilion with this attraction is, I'm just looking at it going, why? Because it fits so well to tell this story. And even as they start getting into Mexico, and like I said, there's live action scenes with them flying through on the Magic Serape. That it's like you're like on the boat ride, and yet this was done in 1944.
So, like, I noticed that too, and watching this again now after I rode Grand Fiesta Tour a number of times when I was down there in the last couple of months, because which we'll talk about later, there were some issues with the Caballero animatronics at the end. So I would ride it to see what was going on with the animatronics. So I rode it several times. And watching this movie again now, I was like, wow, this actually feels a lot like the movie. I mean, it's actually, I feel like a really good representation of the film in the ride, like, especially for a ride that this is like the Caballeros, the Grand Fiesta Tour is an overlay of El Rio de Tiempo, which was there since I think the pavilion opened back in the 80s. So it was just interesting that that this, of all things, was so, I think, close to the IP. I think but that was really cool. And even like the map that they have at the end is like a almost perfect replication of the map that they have in the film.
And as I was watching it, I was thinking there were probably other things that they've hidden in the ride that the rep with the movie that I didn't ever look into before.
I mean, there's a Donald Piñata. Like, that's totally an homage to this, that there's Donald as a piñata that the kids are trying to, hit with the stick. And then there's the whole segment of Donald going for the piñata.
Yeah. Oh, the kids. Hey, so I just want to stop for a second and beg, because we've done this now for the past few shows, because Jill and Eric had such a good reaction from everyone with opening wishables. Each
Oh my god! Oh my
episode,
god!
I've picked out a wishable, and Jill has chosen this one, this Beauty and the Beast wishable.
Visuals.
So if we can get to 50 likes, 50 thumbs up, we will open this wishable tonight, just because apparently you people need some unboxing. So we're going to put it out there as we go along. As long as we get 50 likes before the end of the show, we'll open up this wishable. Anyway.
So, two things I want to say. A, Rob told me before the show that if we get to 100 likes, we can open 2 wishables. So, hit that button. If you've got another YouTube account, log in and hit the like button on that too, because if we get 100 likes, we get 2 wishables. But the second thing I want to add is there may be a boxed in segment featuring some wishables coming up this Friday. So a little teaser for all you watching Deep in the Plus tonight, that tomorrow, as Wishable fans know, is Wishable Wednesday, and the March Wishables in the parks are Peter Pan's Flight, which I'm crazy excited about. So I may be joining Boxed In remotely and coaching Eric on how to Jill Wishables.
Yeah. Back to me. So anyway, in this movie, welcome to Deep in the Plus, there's actually this magic serape, and I don't know if this is a thing. I don't know that I've ever heard of that. It looks like a magic carpet, but it's a magic serape, and that's how they fly around Mexico, right?
So here's what that made me think. How cool of a retheme of Aladdin's magic carpets would this be? I was just like,
why do you hate Aladdin so much? On the next Deep in the Plus, why you hate Aladdin so much?
Why Jill hates Aladdin.
So, so this is, they fly around on this magic serape, and they see all these different parts of Mexico, and they find a beach, which apparently is only inhabited by females. And when they find this beach, Donald does a nosedive down into these women, who then scatter for their lives because he's chasing them around. And then they get playful with it, but it's just like they're hiding, and it's just uncomfortable at this point, right?
He's literally at one point running down the beach with his hands out in front of him, yelling, "I'm gonna get you," at these women. And so then, like, it's gross. Like, Donald is a perv. Like, I'm sorry, but there are a number, this is not the only movie to demonstrate the fact that Donald is, Jose calls him a wolf. He's literally like, "Hey, Toots," like that's one of his lines is, "Hey, Toots," like he calls women Toots. Like, it's so, somebody said, who does he think he is? Nicholas Cicero. It's just like, it's gross. Like, if this movie happened today, people would flip out. Like, I understand this is in a context. It's in the 1940s. Women were viewed far less equally than they are viewed now. But it's bad. Like, it's so bad. And then so Jose finally pulls him away, and Donald's like, "Hey, let me go. This is a free country." And I'm like, it's a free country for grabbing and molesting women? What? Like, that's not what that means.
Come to Mexico. Come
Right.
on down. This is what's waiting for you. Rebecca said in chat, "OMG, guys, my son loves that scene." So
It's so
good luck with that. So one of the things, though,
I hope
he
you
says,
can train him out of
he
that.
says, "Hello, my sweet little bathing beauties." A line he says. You said he calls them toots. "Hello, my sweet little bathing beauties." And another one says, "Come here, you little rascals." I mean, wow, what a rush. What a great movie. I mean, it's just fantastic. So then they go to, like, they have to pull him away again because, again, he's woman crazy. And then Panchito's like, "Oh, but Mexico's also magical at night." And this, to me, is where it gets super trippy. The ladies whose face is in the flower, Like and again, it's live action mixed with animation here. You have the woman who is the cactus in the background, and as she comes to the foreground, she is now, a woman dressed with, she's got spurs on her boots. I mean, it's
She's got a riding crop.
She's got a riding crop. That's the other thing. Yeah, she's got a riding crop and spurs on her boots.
That's not weird.
No, it's perfectly fine. It fits so right into this movie. It's just perfect. So I don't know, like, it feels weird, and the weirdness like goes right to the end, and then it just stops. Like the whole movie, they get to the end and they come out of this, out of that scene, and it's just the three of them dancing around, and Donald is dressed as a bull. And then they shove dynamite up his butt.
There's a lot of butt things happening in this movie.
I mean,
there's
happy birthday, Donald. Here's
right.
Some fireworks. I don't.
This is why they sold the duck butt ears at the parks. Like it starts like in the beginning when Donald starts the whole movie. The movie, like he bends over to plug in the projector or turn or whatever, and the movie starts showing on his butt, and he has to like lift his butt to lift the movie up onto the screen. Or like the scene where he's imitating the flamingo lifting up its legs and then he falls on his butt. Like there's just Donald and his butt happening a lot in this film.
Yeah, and in the chat, I get it. This was 80 years ago. Absolutely. This was not done yesterday with the understanding that we are in a different world. But looking at it through a lens of today, it's almost funny. And that's the thing.
Here's the thing, though. We talked about that huge disclaimer that they show in the beginning, and it's like the disclaimer is kind of about like this contains outdated cultural depictions, but it doesn't really say like, oh, by the way, there's some stuff we show about treatment of women that is really like not okay anymore. Like they don't say that in the disclaimer. That's the thing that it's like I don't know. I don't want to get into a discussion of like the redhead in Pirates of the Caribbean, which in my opinion was the absolutely 100% right thing to do, because that is not selling human beings is not something you should be showing to little children, especially when it's, it's okay to sell women. But in general, like, I feel like there's maybe not enough sensitivity on the sexism aspect of stuff that goes on in Disney films as much as there is the cultural aspect. And I'm not arguing one is better or worse or more important or not, but it's kind of like they put a lot of attention on one and they put very little attention on the other the way I see it.
I will also say, Jill, they don't want you to have this wishable because we have 52 people. Oh, no, I take it back. We have 55 likes. We'll open up the wishable before the end. But I was going to say, though, that...
I will have that wishable.
Yes. Will had a line
it will be mine.
Said the cartoons... It will be mine. All the cartoons were doing butt gags back then. Will.
I mean, today's cartoons really still are. Like, you watch some of the stuff on, like... meant for 10-year-olds today, and it's kind of not any different. I can't really argue. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's hilarious.
I'm not allowed to watch that kind of stuff. So then it explodes, like Donald explodes, and the thing is over. So like I said, it's an hour and 11 minutes, and it just ends. Like I actually at one point felt sort of uncomfortable, paused it, looked, and was like, 2 minutes left. How are they going to?
How is this movie going to end in 2 minutes?
Yeah. And they just don't. They just don't wrap it up. It's just over. And so, I mean, there's not really a wrap-up that's like, hey, happy birthday, Donald. It's been a blast. You should come see us sometime. Hope you enjoyed all the information we gave you. Any questions, like, give me a postcard. Let me know how we can help you. It's just over. So it's crazy. It is crazy. There's a lot of different animation styles, a lot of very trippy things. There's a lot of things that they do, and they go out of their way to be artistic in it, and yet it's not really furthering the story, I don't think. So, I mean, that's a lot of that too that's in there. That said, this is one of the early movies. This was a big deal because this was part of this goodwill trip that they took, funded by the government, to go to South America. They're like, yo, we got Walt Disney. You want to see him? We're sending him to you. He goes down there with his group. They come back with, and do Three Caballeros, Saludos Amigos. So this is important IP in this world of of Disney. But now thinking about how it ties into the parks, we have the Grand Fiesta Tour. You're shaking your head.
No, I want to back up a minute because I want
Okay.
to go back to the part where you talk about this was like a big deal, like for Disney. Like, I want to point out the fact, I know earlier in chat some people were talking about Mary Blair. And I want to just touch on the fact of like what a like just plethora of Disney legends were involved in this film. Seven of the nine old men were animators on this film. Mary Blair was in this film. Richard Irvine, for whom the steamboat or the riverboat in Magic Kingdom was named for quite some time before it got renamed Liberty Bell, and now one of the Transportation and Ticket Center ferries is named for Richard Irvine. He was, I think, the director of this. There were Claude Coates was in this, Yale Gracie, Herb Ryman, John Hench. Like, there were so many like of the people that were Walt Disney Animation and Walt Disney or Disneyland. Like, so many people who were so integral to Disney becoming what it was were involved in this film. Like, you can't kind of discount the fact that this is so like this movie was produced by the people who made Disney what it is and why we love it so much.
Well, and the other thing that you see when you watch Walt and El Grupo is that this happened at a time when there was a lot of turmoil going on with the strike at the studios, and so yeah, I mean it was this there was a lot happening, a lot. Not only the war, not only these great people, not only was the fact that this was 44, 11 years later comes Disneyland. I mean there were a lot of things happening in this time period, and it is an interesting time capsule of that time in general. So yeah, you can't
For
you
sure.
can't overlook that part, that how important this was at the time. And so I think that when you watch this movie, you're entertained, but you also, when you go deeper into it, like we do in this show, you realize that there was so much more that happened. I feel like he wanted to get away. He wanted to take his core people away so that he could get away from the craziness and the frustrations he had with the strike that were going on. Um,
Well, one
so
of the things I read about that was it was interesting the way it was phrased because, all these people at Disney Studios, I think in 41, started striking. And because working conditions were poor, pay was not good enough. And like Walt sort of saw it less as a company and more as a family. And he was like, taken aback by the fact that people were not like, I will do whatever I need to do for the family. Like, it was, no, this is my job and I need to get paid more or I need to not get treated like crap. Like, this is not about I'm part of this family or not. This is, I'm your employee and you can't treat me this way. Like, it was a very interesting kind of look at the mythology that was Walt Disney, both kind of how we see it historically, as well as maybe how he saw it in his own head at the time. That, we've kind of created this cult of Walt, and I think he probably created a little bit of one for himself. And it's easy to look back and kind of see what we want to see about Walt Disney, but some of the history of this film is that Walt wasn't always great to people. Like, he was very demanding and he didn't always really think about what other people were going through or put himself in their shoes.
yeah. When you're saying that, it makes me think of like when I first started to work for the Disney company and I went down to Walt Disney World and got a job after college. I worked there and was so excited. I mean, this was my everything. And I'm there next to people who were doing it because it was a well-paying job at the time. And so we're doing Disney traditions and I'm answering all the questions and who are the seven dwarfs? It's like, I got you, I mean, I was just all about it. But there are people next to me who were like, yeah, this is okay and all, but I just need a job. And so there is a difference between, the people who are passionate about it and the people who just need a job. And maybe he just got I don't know, wrapped up in those people who were just so passionate about it that he didn't maybe understand when people were just doing it for a paycheck. So,
Yeah, and I mean,
um,
you can't expect everybody to kind of
drink the Kool-Aid.
when you start a company, you can't expect everybody to drink the Kool-Aid, and you can't expect everybody to care equal amounts because they've all got different stuff.
Not me. Kool-Aid. So anyway,
Kool-Aid.
um, so now let's talk about the parks. Can we talk about the parks?
Mhm.
So, I mean, the
We have eight
legacy
minutes
of
left to
this.
talk about the parks, by the way.
Yeah, okay. So the legacy of this, one of the things that's a big deal for me is the Mickey Mouse review. The Mickey Mouse review used to be at the Magic Kingdom. I think I really kind of fell in love with the Three Caballeros in this thing that they did where so it still existed in Tokyo. So we have some footage of the Three Caballeros. Maybe you've seen these animatronics before. I don't know. Maybe you've seen them some in some park in Florida
I mean, not
recently, or
recently.
not so recently. But what I loved about this particular show was that the theater
Are
would
those
get
the
dark.
animatronics?
They are. They are. The theater would get
Because
dark.
gosh, they're
And,
moving so much more than the ones in Florida even did at the time.
yeah. But the theater would get dark and they would like shoot across to the other side of the theater as if the Three Caballeros were like jotting from one place to the next. So they were down on the magic serape on the, on the stage, and then they're up and, on the sides, and then they're back down at, at the bottom. I always thought that that was great because it was like they were shooting themselves over to the next side and back to this side. So, that's, yeah. So here's another look at those fellas, and they're like lowering into the stage. So, for the people who know that the Grand Fiesta Tour had a screen of the Three Caballeros until one day they just put these animatronics there, and they were in, the Grand Fiesta Tour in Mexico. Fantastic. I mean, it was a great addition. We loved it until they started breaking down post-COVID, or the reopening after COVID, and so we've lost them for now. They're just cutouts. We don't, I guess, have time to get deep into that. But are there any comments you want to make about that?
I just it's depressing because I feel like it's such a glaring piece of evidence that maintenance on the parks is not currently being prioritized. I don't think it was prioritized during COVID, and I don't think it's being prioritized now after COVID. And it also shows that guest experience is not getting the same weight that I think it should or would have in an earlier time. I have seen those flat cardboard cutouts in person, and they're embarrassing. Like, that is an embarrassment for a Walt Disney World theme park to
Yeah.
have as the finale of an attraction. And I don't care that it's not an e-ticket attraction. The finale of your attraction is three cardboard cutouts. I mean, they're
Three
plywood or
cardboard
whatever. They're not
cutouts.
cardboard,
Three
but
cardboard
it's
cutouts.
yeah.
Well,
And
so
it's
so
just
the thing that we talked about on Park Center, which I don't understand, is that before the animatronics, there was this screen, and the screen theoretically still exists there. Why couldn't they have done the screen instead of having the three cardboard cutouts? And I think your response was anybody who knew about the screen is not working there and has been let go.
it's been furloughed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I just, that would have been so much better than seeing the cutouts there. But we're told they will return, the animatronics will return. That would be great because we've also heard that this may get an overlay of Coco. That's been passed around for years. And some people would go, oh, more IP. Well, this is IP. I mean, this is based on Three Caballeros. So, they would be a swap for IP. But I love these guys. I think that I romanticize this movie a little bit. So what I do want to do, as we've got minutes left, and I need to get your take and open the Swishable and give mine, is Jill Diffendahl. People want to know, would you recommend this movie?
Gosh, that's so hard. I want to be like, watch the first like 45 minutes of it, but then shut off the last the end of it, because the end of it gets weird and kind of offensive. Like after Panchito and the pinata scene, then just turn it off, because all the rest of it is creepy and weird. And like obvious, like some Walt Paraguay like drug trippy like concept art for Journey into Imagination thing. Like it's just bizarre. So watch the beginning, like watch Pablo. I love Pablo. Watch Gauchito and Burrito. Watch the silly rare birds and the Araquan and all of that fun stuff. Maybe fast forward through the Bahia part and then turn it off after the pinata part. Like I know that's not a straight answer to your question. I don't want to say don't watch this because I love it. Like to me, like Three Caballeros is one of the most memorable Disney songs that wasn't written by the Sherman Brothers. You know, like it's so memorable. It's so fun. It's just, this movie is fun in a lot of places. Just I want to cut out the parts that aren't.
So I would say, and I've said this before, is that, you know, to me, this is a part of Disney history, and we talked about how important this was in the time and things that were going on. So if you're a Disney fan, I would watch this. I wouldn't suggest it for kids because I think it's too slow. I don't think it stands the test of time for that. I think that, you know, my son is older and was just kind of making it through, and I think, as a matter of fact, he wanted to watch all the full-length animated features, and he got slowed down when we hit the anthology movies because they're a little bit kind of all over the place. So I would say that, you know, to me, it's a very important movie for Disney. I think that because there is IP that exists still, and, you know, we briefly talked about it, maybe we'll review The Legend of the Three Caballeros someday, that there was a 13-episode, one-season TV show about them being left a magical atlas. So, you know, I think that there's still a lot to offer in this movie, and I think you need to know the source material, and this is the source material. So for that reason, I'd suggest it. So, Wishable, what are you thinking, Jill? What are you thinking?
Gosh, it's so, squeeze it a little, Jill it a little. Okay, I think it's Lumiere.
It is. Like, it's sealed, but I can almost tell you that it is. It's Belle. We were both wrong. It's Belle in her dress. This was the variant. This was the actual. There was a variant that was in a blue dress. So yeah, it's Belle. There you go.
I love the ball.
So thank you guys for the likes. Thanks for watching this with us. Thanks for joining us tonight.
You all.
We'll be doing some more reviews every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. But now you get to tune over to the main WDWNT channel for Tom versus Josh. Jill, thanks for doing this with me. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Have
a good night.
Bye.